It is tragically short-sighted to think that the drama in Washington that shook the financial world this week is only about the Trump presidency. Yet that's the underlying message in virtually everything I heard and read as the latest missteps or scandals, whatever you want to call them, have now morphed into the first talk of impeachment. But wasn't that always the goal of Mr. Trump's political opponents? From day one, the Democrats refused to work with the new president. From day one, they've called into question not just his competence, but more importantly, the legitimacy of his election, with all that talk about the Russian influence over the election. Here we are now, 6 months later plus, and no proof has been offered that successfully links or that the Russians successfully influenced the election has been presented. None. Look, I'm not here to debate the issues. I want to point out, though, that the goal was to call into question the legitimacy of Mr. Trump's election. And from day one, much of the press, led by the New York Times and the Washington Post, covered every misstep, real and overblown, with the theme of Mr. Trump's unfit for office. And he was illegitimately elected. They have relentlessly featured innuendo and speculation that undermines the president. And by the way, we just got a Harvard study released that shows that, in fact, is the case. It's not my imagination. The coverage in Trump's first 100 days is a disgrace. They looked at all the top media outlets, television and newspapers, and found that it was just overwhelmingly negative, led by CNN, who had 93 negative stories against 7 positive. New York Times, when it comes to newspapers. That is not objective journalism. By the way, just on an aside, if I had to bet, we're going to find out that despite all of the coverage to the contrary, President Trump did not try and stop the investigation into National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. You've been led on. I'm basing that on the testimony that Mr. Comey himself gave May 3rd. He was testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he was asked point blank if he had ever been asked to stop an investigation for political reasons. And this was his answer, in quotes, "Not in my experience, because it would be a big deal to tell the FBI stop doing something like that without an appropriate purpose. It's not happened in my experience," end of quote. Well, I don't think he's changing his tune this coming week. And by the way, that response also encompassed questions about was when he stopped the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private server emails, was that also because of political influence? No, is the answer he gave. Anyways, I digress. I'm not trying to jump to any conclusions here. I don't want to satisfy any political preference or anything. I don't care about that. But I am here to defend the truth. Let's find out what it is my point. I'm simply saying when I hear and read such one-sided coverage, virtually all of it motivated by the political establishment's opposition to Mr. Trump, especially when it's been totally based on innuendo, unsubstantiated leaks, and speculation, as an adult, my radar goes up. I'm not so easily manipulated. Of course, I'm in the minority. Obviously, I'm in the minority. But my advice to you is be suspicious. My God, why are you accepting hook, line, and sinker the establishment's view? At least be critical of what you're hearing. These are nasty people playing a nasty game. Integrity has long since gone out of that political process down there. And you want an idea how dirty? Again, I'll digress for a second. You may remember the leaked emails that showed that the Democratic National Committee sabotaged the campaign of Bernie Sanders, which prompted the resignation of the head of the Democratic National Committee, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Well, the spin was that the emails were part of a Russian hack. Well, this week, Fox News ran a story linking the murder of Seth Rich. His name was Seth Rich, the Democratic National Committee staffer, who was shot in the back minutes from his home in July of last year. Now, this is according to an anonymous FBI official. The law enforcement investigators found 44,053 emails, 17,761 attachments that were sent between the Democratic National Committee leaders from January 2015, May 2016. This is the thing that Rich shared them with WikiLeaks before he was gunned down last July. But that's just an interesting sidelight to the story that you probably haven't heard. But here's the bigger picture, and it's in play with far higher stakes. This is not ultimately about the legitimacy of the Trump election. It actually gets to the legitimacy of the system itself. That's what the Democrats were doing right out of the gate, saying, you know what, we won the popular vote, but the system didn't allow us to win. Well, on Wednesday, the markets gave us a hint as the impact of any kind of impeachment talk. The entire market rise since November has been fueled by the Trump pro-business agenda, whether you like it or not, but it's mainly lower taxes, reduced regulation, incentives to repatriate trillions of dollars held outside the U.S. by companies, and reduced personal rates, and that infrastructure spending. Well, an impeachment move throws all of that into question, and the losses in the markets would be enormous. Wednesday was just a hint. And then you better be careful of that spillover effect. Simply put, the world's financial system, man, I'm thinking the European banking system, is precarious. And they cannot handle the uncertainty an impeachment push would bring. So, let me also ask you a quick question. Leaving aside whatever your personal preference is, if they were successful, if Mr. Trump is successfully pushed from office, do you get that tens of millions of people would be outraged? That they would see it as a triumph of the swamp? Electing Mr. Trump put a cap on those anti-establishment feelings, or gave him at least a direction. Impeaching him would blow the cap off. It would make the anti-Trump protest look like child's play. Democracy itself would come under attack that no amount of selfies and high-minded commentaries in the New York Times would stop. This is really a case of be careful what you wish for. Opponents of President Trump are not just going after a blowhard, egocentric, thin-skinned political enemy. They're undermining democracy itself. And if they're even halfway successful, the global economy, including Canada's, and the financial system will suffer a great deal. Wednesday's reaction in the various market was just a hint. And I shudder to think what would happen.